Hey everybody, my name is Paul Esden Jr., aka Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com, and welcome wherever you may be watching the show. We appreciate it, and officially, welcome to the offseason. I guess that's specifically for the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles, who are just in the Super Bowl. A team like the Jets, well, we've been here for quite some time, but that's neither here nor there. Let's welcome in my co-host, as always, the handsome devil himself, the former NFL general manager at multiple locations, and a former NFL Executive of the Year, Randy Mueller. What's up, Randy?
I am doing great, Paul. Thanks for having me back. I guess our keys worked one more week, so we got in the building and they're letting us have another show. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, a show next week is certainly not promised, so let's just live like this is our last. And I
That's
feel
right.
like we've been doing that the entire show's history, quite frankly,
No
which
doubt.
has been a comforting feeling nonetheless, Randy. That's for sure. Well, first off, let's go right off the bat. And I'm seeing fans already joining us in the comment section wherever we're watching. Feel free to continue to do so. But let's dive right into the Super Bowl, Randy. Before we even get to sides of Eagles or Chiefs, just what were your overall thoughts on the Super Bowl? It seemed like we kind of really got an instant classic there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I thought it was the two best teams, and they kind of served up what we had anticipated. And a lot of times, as you know, the Super Bowl doesn't actually work out like that. In this case, it did. I thought they both teams played probably their games. It was a good game. Obviously, it was competitive down to the end, and I didn't get caught up so much in the officials and the controversy and all that. I kind of saw it for what it was, Paul. And I think it was pretty good football for the most part. And you don't always get that either with 2 weeks being off and all the distractions that come with this game sometimes. But I thought both teams were pretty much at full strength for what they had. And I enjoyed it. Obviously, I watched all the games, but I had no disappointment and no really criticism of what we saw.
And Randy, you nailed it right there. I mean, quite frankly, we've been spoiled more times than not with Super Bowls because, again, it is somewhat random. The two
Yep.
teams, and I said this the last couple of weeks, it's somewhat random that in this single elimination tournament, that if you wake up, you're a really good team, and you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, you could lose a game and it's over. Your entire season comes to an end. Although in this particular case, obviously, we got two number one seeds going at it with one another. I thought it was a great game. I didn't care one iota or the other about the flag. I'm like,
Yeah.
everyone's talking about the flag the next day. I'm like, what about that great football game we just saw
Yeah.
with two teams trading blows, great defense, great offense? I thought we saw a lot there. So, Randy, you hit the nail on the head as you normally do. And I
Well,
think that's it, that we should be cherishing that one.
I think sometimes the narrative goes to the negative part of whatever we see, and that's welcome to 2023, right? That's just the way society is sometimes, and everybody looks for the problems or the issues or the controversy. I didn't see it either. I mean, I thought it was a penalty. I thought it should have been called. Could have been called earlier in the game, a time or two as well. But for the most part, the referees, I think, stayed out of it. And I know people don't believe that I've heard crazy uh, comments about games being fixed and all the other. And I hit
Conspiracy
delete,
theories, the
delete,
NFL
delete.
script, right?
Yeah, every
Yes.
time I hear this because it's just nonsense. And I'm with you. I thought it was a good game by two good teams, and we should cherish it. And what we saw was one player who's the best in the world at what he does, another one that's ascending who put up numbers, minus the one turnover. Jalen Hurts could have been the MVP of the game. So, and it could have turned out totally different. Pat Mahomes didn't really make any mistakes. Thus, his team came out on top.
100%. And ultimately, that's where we lead. And we head into that, diving into the Philadelphia Eagles, who are, well, the Super Bowl loser, as it is. And, adding a little insult to injury here, not only did they lose the game, but they lost both of their coordinators. Shane Steichen heading to Indianapolis to be the next head coach of the Colts. Jonathan Gannon, their defensive coordinator, heading over to be the Arizona Cardinals head coach. And we kind of talked about this possibility with both of these vacancies heading into the balance, and with the Super Bowl being the last game to be played, perhaps could they both pick from that pool? And quite frankly, they picked from the same pool of doing it in. And I have to go to you here, Randy, as a former NFL general manager. How devastating of a blow is that? And especially when you consider they didn't win the Super Bowl. Maybe that's a little easier pill to swallow if you win the championship. See you later, Steichen. See you later, Gannon.
Yeah.
Now they lose both of them, and they have to try to do it again next year.
Well, it's definitely an issue. I do think in some cases, teams can look ahead. I'm sure Howie Roseman thought this was possible and planned for it. I always would have a guy or two in the bullpen that you thought could be bumped up to the next level, whatever that job is, whether it's a job in scouting, whether it's a job as an assistant or as a coordinator. You've got to have a plan long term to the one thing we know about the NFL, Paul, is a season of change every year. You're going to change coaches. You're going to change players. You're going to change front office people. It's just the way it is. So as the lead decision maker, I think Howie probably has a plan for it. Whether he'll promote from within, I don't know. But I know this, if I'm an Eagles fan, I'm good with what he's going to do because he has had the Midas touch, especially these last 3 or 4 years. And that part has worked. So I thought it was interesting that the losing team loses 2 coordinators, 35-ish, less experienced. Shane Steichen, I think, had called plays for 31 different NFL games. Jonathan Gannon, 2 years as a coordinator. That's it. But yet the winning team has an offensive coordinator that now all of a sudden has to go somewhere else to prove he can do it. And another 2-time Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator that nobody can even give an interview for. So obviously these guys are older guys. And so we see kind of where the league is. It wants younger people. It wants to hire young ascending coaches. The criteria is different nowadays than it ever has. I don't know that it's always the best person that gets these jobs. I know it's that way in the GM world as well. It's young ascending talent that ownership wants to put in charge. We'll see if it works out. I think you saw 4 really good coordinators in the Super Bowl. Some have more skins on the wall than others, and I think education is expensive, right? Paul, it's hard to get experience. And I think sometimes we get led down different roads that make other candidates even more viable for us for whatever that reason. Time will tell. I think, and I know we're going to talk about it, but I think there's some fits with both of these coordinators who got jobs that we can kind of discuss in a deeper mode. I hope Eric Bieniemy gets a chance to do this thing probably somewhere else. It's probably time for him to sever the cord with Andy Reid and prove that he can do it on his own. It just seems like a shame that a guy can be so successful as Eric Bieniemy has been, having interviewed for so many jobs, hasn't gotten the opportunity, but yet he doesn't really get a sniff as a head coach candidate this time around. And a guy like Steve Spagnuolo, people say, well, he had his opportunity with the Rams. That was an awful setup when he was at the Rams. They were a bad team, trust me. You can't put that on the coach. And that is something that he has to live with, I guess, forever. But 4 good coaches, 4 different fates for all of them. And it made for an interesting set of narratives even coming out of the Super Bowl.
I forgot. I'm not sure where I put the aluminum foil ahead of this so we can wrap it on our heads and talk about these conspiracy theories. But why do you venture, Randy, that these guys didn't? Is it ageism? Is it, to your point, Eric Bieniemy? He's been around forever. There's a lot of pelts on his wall, as you said. Yeah. Also, Spags, baby. He's the one who was helping, dethrone the New England Patriots with those Giants teams. I mean, what are we talking about here? Why the heck aren't these guys, in your opinion? Why didn't they get the attention that probably they deserved?
I don't know. I think there are people within certain walls, and I'm not saying it was the Colts or the Cardinals, but they tend to hire younger ascending talent because they can kind of keep them in a box. And a lot of times a guy who has a lot of experience, a head coach, maybe who's been a head coach before, might demand a little more space in the room, space in the building per se, if that makes any sense. Yes. And they don't necessarily want that. The people that are involved with the hiring want to fit that coach in a small box and keep him in that box. And sometimes these younger coaches with less experience fit better for the other people that are in the building already. And so maybe that's part of it. I don't think there's necessarily an age, what's the word you used?
Ageism. Yes.
Ageism. Okay. I'm from Idaho, so I don't know that term, but it maybe that's an issue, but I really think it's more of setting your criteria and being less expansive with that role and that criteria and wanting to keep these coaches in one specific spot. Therefore, Shane Steichen or Gannon not going to challenge the cap guy, not going to challenge the personnel people, not going to challenge really a lot of other kingdoms within that office, if that makes any sense. So it's a good fit for them. I think sometimes you get a lesser talent, and I'm not saying that about these coaches. Sometimes you get lesser knowledge, lesser football acumen, but it makes everybody in the building more comfortable because here's an inexperienced guy who will stay in his lane.
Well, speaking of staying in his lane, Randy, I will tell you this: that the only reason they bring me in is I say loud noises and weird vernacular. That's quite frankly my job. So I have to throw a couple of these kind of words in there. So that's okay. You stay exactly where you are, and I'll certainly stay exactly where I am here.
I love it.
Before we do ascend to the Chiefs, so let's go down that detour in what you just spoke of these hires in these individual places. You mentioned. Let's go first, I guess, with Shane Steichen, who got the first whack at the pinata here, going to Indianapolis, and that's a wild situation. We'll get more on that in a little bit, but Steichen to Indianapolis, interesting, especially since they had Sirianni on their staff. He goes to Eagles. They replace him with the guy they took from the Eagles over there. That seems kind of odd.
Yeah, I mean Shane Steichen is as much of a underling to Frank Reich as anybody, right? And so who knows? It doesn't make sense. But I do, having said that, I do think it's a good fit. We all know the one thing that the Colts have struggled with is finding the right quarterback. Chris Ballard, I think, is a good personnel guy, but you got to say what it is. They've swung and whiffed 3 times at quarterback. However, they came to the conclusion they did, it hasn't worked. And Shane Steichen has proved the last couple of years that he can take a different type talent and mold an offense around him, wherever his strengths are. That's hard to do in the NFL. And I'm sure that went a long ways toward Shane getting this job and a long ways toward the Colts deciding that Shane was the right guy for that. So wherever they go, they're going nowhere unless they fix the quarterback position. Shane has kind of guided Jalen Hurts through his progression as an NFL quarterback. I would assume that's the hope that the Jim Irsay, Chris Ballard have with the Colts, is that Shane would do the same thing with him. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. I think Jalen Hurts probably doesn't get enough credit, and others around him get more credit. But that work ethic, his set of intangibles, his character is hard to find. And good luck if we think we're going to clone that and figure out another way to do it with a quantity like him. We'll see. But I think that's probably why the fit made sense for both sides. And frankly, I think it's a good fit for right now.
All right, let's go to the other hire. Gannon from Philadelphia to Arizona. A couple of things here which are kind of interesting. So they went on the Kyler offensive sexy splash, and that ultimately led to Kyler. And they're like, no, terrible. Go to Thailand and don't come back. Yeah. And then they go, well, Gannon, defense, yes. And the weird thing is the social media reaction to this one, I know a lot of Eagles fans kind of have a lot of Eagles people, and they were celebrating that Gannon left. They went, thank goodness. We've been waiting to get rid of that guy for a while, which seems odd considering what they've been able to do, but maybe it was just kind of coordinator yes man with the talent of the Eagles defense. Could anyone have really sat in that seat and been able to produce? What do you make of the Gannon to Cardinals landing spot? That one was interesting.
Yeah, I think your points are right on. I think the Eagles were as talented on defense as any team in the league. I'm not saying that Jonathan Gannon did a job that all of us could have done, but they had better players than most teams they faced. That's the equivalent of, in Alabama in football, having better players than everybody else, or Ohio State having better players than everybody else. Sometimes the coach, in some ways, he recruited him and was a part of it, but he was just charged with keeping it on the rails. And I think that's kind of what they did in Philly. It was not unanimous that Jonathan Gannon was head coach material, as evidenced by what you said, even with the tough crowd that we all know Philadelphia is. But I don't know about this fit. I would probably question this a little more than I would the Shane Steichen move, just because you have a first-time GM in Monty Ossenfort. You have a first-time, really inexperienced coach now in Jonathan Gannon. I wonder, and I don't know this, Paul, but I throw this back at you. I wonder if those hires were made somewhat on the cheap, because we know the kind of money that we're paying to Steve Keim and to Cliff Kingsbury, who just signed long-term giant money extensions 6 or 8 months ago. So I don't want to go down that route, but that could be seen as very Cardinal-ish with Bill Bidwell, Michael's dad, back in his day.
Yeah,
that would make some sense. And I think Michael's taken the organization to greater heights and made great strides with regard to that. But that always factors into me as well. But they're rolling the dice. 2 young guys. Neither has been in the chair that they're in. We'll see. They've got to find an offensive system that the quarterback can highlight himself in and highlight his skills in. That's the tough one for me. Can it be done? Maybe, but there's not a lot of offensive systems right now where I would say that makes a lot of sense for Kyler Murray. So we'll see. That's still the elephant in the room for me.
Yeah, to your point, I'm going to be honest. After the Cardinals went on their run last season, again, they started off really hot in the regular season. We're not talking about this past season that just ended. We're talking about the 2021 campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Cardinals brass gave extensions to both Keim and Cliff, I think a lot of us raised our eyebrow and went, that seems a little aggressive, a little early perhaps. And then again, the quote unquote egg on face says Keim leaves for medical reasons and then ultimately just because he's not coming back. And then Cliff, I mean, that's a lot of guaranteed dollars, dollar bills that all of a sudden were just lit on fire. And again, they have to pay these new guys that are coming in. So I'm not saying, Randy, but I'm just saying that maybe there's a little something there that,
we're both singing the same tune. I hope that's not the case because I do know Monty and have known him for a long time. I think he will be a good GM. I think there's going to be a period of adjustment though. He's going to be overwhelmed at first. Hopefully he has the right people around him that can help him. Jonathan Gannon, I'm not so much in the loop on his particular skill set or what would make him be so special for this job, but we'll see. But it is a lot of inexperience. It is a lot of perspective that might be missing. Hopefully they can work well together. I'm sure they will. But let's be honest, that team needs an overhaul. They've got to rebuild the team. We talked about Kyler, but it's not a good enough team throughout the rest of its roster either. So they've got a lot of work to do. I'd be interested to know, and I guess I could text Monty, but I'm just saying if they're going to adhere to the Patriot way of acquiring talent and evaluating talent, or if Monty now, who's kind of been out on his own recently with Tennessee, if he'll kind of do it his own way, because we know, and I've been skeptical of this, the groups that have tried to take the Patriot way and go elsewhere with it has not worked out. No. And so my guess is Monty will have enough of his own spin on it to where he doesn't have to have Bill Belichick or Tom Brady to make it work. But that's still the $6 million question is what kind of system can they evaluate? Can they then value, and then can they build this team? Because it needs a rebuild.
Yeah, let's do one more quick Eagles thing here. And you really kind of already addressed it, but just to make sure we clarify it here. And that is simply this, that with those two coordinators leaving, the Eagles obviously have to make some key decisions. Now, the kind of first world problem they're dealing with is because they've been in the middle of a Super Bowl run, they've had other needs. They've had other things they've been paying attention to. Now, all of a sudden, the season comes to this crashing halt, and they have to decide on how to replace these coordinators so late in the process that do they have to lean promotion from within? And hopefully, to your point, that they've had a couple of people in the bullpen. I love that reference. And hopefully, they've had a couple of people, and there seems to be a lot of talent on the staff. So maybe, because if not, they choose to go outside the walls. Every other NFL team has hired their guys and picked their staffs and kind of went through. So you're kind of be picking through the scraps per se when you're looking through some of these names. That could be kind of the first world problem of being the loser in the Super Bowl and dealing with these kind of changes this late in the process.
Yeah, the timing's not ideal, but I know Howie well enough to know he's going to have a plan. I think there's a couple things that you can take from it, and I think it actually could be a good thing. If you have somebody from within, and again, I would bet he has a candidate or two on both sides of the ball that are worthy of ascending to that job, then it's also a time to get some fresh ideas from a new hire coming from somewhere else. So you can kind of keep the status quo. My guess is they do not want to change the offense. Jalen Hurts is not going to have to learn something new. We've seen him progress for the first time in his career under the same offensive coordinator and scheme 2 years in a row. We'd have to think the third year would even be better. So I could see offensively for sure not many changes being made. So somebody bumps up, you bring another guy in. I would like to see that guy come from the outside because I want some fresh eyes. I want some independent guys underneath that we can get their opinions on in a totally independent way. And then on defense, I think if you could see that defensive coordinator job being taken by somebody from the outside world, in my opinion, because I think they're going to have really good players still, even though they're going to have some roster moves to make, some changes to make. I think that would be the side of the ball that a tweaking of the schemes, a tweaking of the staff could be more prevalent and take place at a higher level. Just my opinion, Paul. Now, I don't know how this is going to go, but that's what I would do. And I tend to think that, Howie is not surprised by anything that's happened yet. So there's a plan in place. He's talked about it internally. I'm sure the ownership has been involved in this. It didn't come up in the last few days that Shane Steichen might leave and that
Right.
Gannon might leave. So good organizations plan for their people and actually take that as a badge of credit that, hey, we're a spot where people are coming. It's happened to Howie in the front office over the last few
Right.
years a bunch.
Yes.
They've lost
Mhm.
some guys, whether it's Andy Weidel, whether it's Joe Douglas, and even some more
Yeah.
recent losses that they've incurred, and they haven't missed a beat. So they'll figure it out for sure.
And again, that's the first world problem of you hope to be in that
Yep,
position that people are
no doubt.
vulturing your coaching staff and scouting department and front office. That must mean that you're doing something pretty good. And obviously, a lot of credit to the Philadelphia Eagles and specifically Howie Roseman for that. And let's go from the Super Bowl losers to the Super Bowl winners, the Kansas City Chiefs. And right off the bat, congratulations, 2 championships, 4 years, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, what more can we say about all the wonderful accolades he's been able to achieve? However, there is one thing there that needs to be said about whatever the weird, odd narrative is here, Randy. And I think we whispered about it last week, but now getting all loud and abrasive about it. Let's just be blunt. The Kansas City Chiefs were, quote, rebuilding. They, quote, proved the doubters wrong.
Yeah.
People thought they weren't going to make the playoffs. Who the hell was saying these things? That's what I want to know. Patrick Mahomes at the parade spewing this. Travis Kelce spewing this in the postgame, a media postgame celebration. Hey, you won the Super Bowl. Well, that's to all the haters out there, all the people who didn't believe in us, the number 1 seed Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. Who was saying this, Randy? That makes absolutely no sense.
No, you're 100% right. I chuckled when I heard some of this stuff. I'll tell you what I have tired of, really, and this is the cynical old guy in me when I maybe am saying get off my yard. Athletes that are in parades that get all liquored up and say stupid things. That's what I've tired of, right?
Yes.
Because none of it makes sense. Nor did
Right.
Travis Kelce, who I love, a week before when he called out the Cincinnati mayor, saying after this game how they were doubted and this and that. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nobody that I ever heard had any critical comments made about the Chiefs. If they're that thin-skinned and use that as motivation, God bless them, because they had to connect a few dots on their own to get to that point for sure. But I agree with you. I had not heard any of such talk. Hey, but we all have seen the Michael Jordan biographies, right? He used the littlest things to motivate himself. He just didn't go as public with it after the fact, I don't think, as these guys have, and actually have credited some of these naysayers with their rise to fame. So I'm with you. Didn't see it. Don't believe it. I just think the Chiefs are good, and I'm willing to say that without saying nobody should have doubted them. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Again, I think all of it's bizarre. I would feel like if you had it in your back pocket, the Giants when they went on their run against the 18-0 New England Patriots, like, hey, it's us against the world. Okay, makes sense. Sold. I'm in that locker room. I understand completely what you're talking about. If Andy Reid would have come, waddling into the locker room and told me, hey, boys, it's us against the world here, I'd be like, whoa, coach. No offense here. What are we talking about? With all due respect, but apparently here we are. I do want to take a quick detour on the Eric Bieniemy talk in which you mentioned, and that the possibility, and that there is that narrative out there that, hey, Andy Reid is the guy who's calling the plays, so you're not really a part of it, so you have to go somewhere else to prove that you could do it on your own. And if I'm Eric Bieniemy, Sam Howell? I want to go from Patrick Mahomes to Sam Howell. That's how I want to prove to the world that all of a sudden I'm a great coach. I don't know. If Eric Bieniemy hasn't been getting the proper love after winning all these Super Bowls with the Chiefs, I'm not sure the pivot for me. And I'm not sure what my agent is saying to me. No, Washington, that beautiful organization with their rich history of stability at the quarterback position, that's the place to go to rebuild it. That one seems a little odd, Randy.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. I think that's a year from being out of the league because I think they're up against it in Washington this year. They've got to win. And you're right. The Sam Howell case to be made is not one, and we talked about it last week on the show.
Yes.
That's borderline incompetence if that's the plan going forward. So I'm with you. I don't know that that's the place I would want to go if I was Eric Bieniemy. I would hope that there's better options for him, but whether the rumor, innuendo, whatever has held Eric Bieniemy back to this point with other teams, I think he probably has to sever the cord and prove to himself and everybody else that I can do this really without Andy. And I don't know if that's fair. In fact, I'd probably say it's not fair. But at this point, I don't know that he has a choice. So it's a tough spot. He's got to be confident that he can get it done. I'm with you, though. Hopefully there's some better options than the Washington setup where they are looking for a quarterback. That's going to be a reach in my mind.
Yeah, again, I don't know about you, but if it's me and I'm Eric Bieniemy, I'll just keep winning a few more Super Bowls with the Chiefs while hopefully the NFL figures it out and then eventually they want me. I don't know. Maybe that's what I would do, but I understand that, again, there's only 32 of these jobs. Again, Bieniemy, of course, hoping and aspiring to be one of those head coaches. I mean, that is a rare fraternity. So I understand the allure, the piece of meat hanging in front of the treadmill here, but winning a couple of championships may not be a bad idea either, which is what he's been doing, quite frankly.
I think you'd have to change my key, like we've joked about. You'd have to sweep out my office, and you'd have to physically take me out to my car and tell me to be on my way to leave Patrick Mahomes. That's all I'm saying, especially for a lateral move. Now, if there's some insinuating circumstances, surrounding circumstances that we don't know that change the way we should perceive this, God bless it. It is what it is. But I wouldn't want to be leaving that, like you're saying. I wouldn't leave Patrick Mahomes for really anybody in the league.
100%. Let's move over to Travis Kelce with the Chiefs. Obviously, he's been remarkable. Although I think some of these kids, I feel like I'm more so on you, Randy, that these damn prisoner of the moment, everybody's saying, obviously, Travis Kelce, the greatest tight end of all time. I'm like, hold on just a moment, people. What about that Tony Gonzalez guy who played for your own organization? Let's rein it in, people. So people have been a little too aggressive for my liking after the Super Bowl, being a little too right now, being a little too prisoner of the moment. But Travis Kelce is 33 years of age. He will turn 34 during the 2023 upcoming season. He's got a couple of rings on his finger, a lot of accolades at the tight end position. Quite frankly, how much gas does he have left in the tank? And I'm sure Travis will be listening to this and use this as a future motivational chip, I'm certain. But, there's been some people that have been trying to prognosticate when Kelce will fall off. A lot of people thought this year, even though Tyreek Hill was being taken out, maybe Kelce's skill set is eroding, and he gave us a very clear understanding that is not the case this past season. But realistically, how much more juice is there left in the tank for a guy with his frame, his size, and how heavily the Chiefs are leaning on him?
Well, I think he's the man. He's the focal point, really, of their offense outside of where Patrick is. He's the guy that he's his security blanket. He identifies coverages. He knows exactly where he is. Defenses have to play the Chiefs different because of the tight end. And that is a rare commodity in as a whole in the NFL. You just don't see that, but it's true. Every time I see him running wide open, I just shake my head. I can't understand why coordinators around the league can't at least put people near him. I'm not saying they're going to ever stop him, but he's so wide open that, I could make some of those throws to him. That's how highly I think of him. And I see no, like you said, slippage at all. I think this guy should be clearly a 3 or 4 year more able to commit. The Chiefs should commit to him for 3 or 4 more years if that's what it takes. I'm stumbling around with my words, but I really don't have any fancy way to say Kelce has not shown any signs of letting up, and I don't think he's going anywhere. There's plenty of juice in the tank. I wouldn't even bring it up if I was anybody with regard to the Chiefs. I'd be happy, and I'd ride that horse as long as it can.
And a note to my staff off camera, Travis Kelce fantasy draft. Put it at the top of my board, please, after this past season. So I would really appreciate that. And I want to bring up this nugget, and it's interesting, and I'm not sure where I sit, Randy, as also a former running back, but it's an interesting nugget that's been circulating on social media since the Chiefs have won the Super Bowl. And a shout out to Marcus Mosher of Pro Football Focus, who tweeted this out. Isaiah Pacheco was the leading rusher for the Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs, and his base salary is $870,000. Now, you guys won't be able to see this graphic, but I'll be able to walk you through some of the key pieces here that over the span, and this is what Marcus did, for the last 12, 13 plus years, the leading rusher on the Super Bowl winning team has come incredibly cheap. I will name a couple of them for you. Isaiah Pacheco just happened, 870,000. Cam Akers, 890,000. Leonard Fournette, and remember, that's not the team that took him fourth overall. That's his second team they ended up going to, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, $2 million. Damian Williams with the Kansas City Chiefs, that the last time they won, just over $1 million. Sony Michel with the New England Patriots, he was $500,000. LeGarrette Blount with the Eagles, LeGarrette Blount with the Patriots, he was jumping around winning a couple of rings back then. C.J. Anderson, LeGarrette Blount again. Percy Harvin somehow led was the leading rusher in that Seahawks Super Bowl, that blowout. Ray Rice, Ahmad Bradshaw, James Stark, Pierre Thomas, and all of these guys, the highest number is $2.5 million. So that's the ceiling. And much of it was obviously far fewer than that. And the 2.5 million is kind of unique because Percy Harvin was a wide receiver. But the point is that essentially you don't want to pay, and this has been the theme since the Super Bowl, you don't want to pay running backs or draft them high for that matter, and pay the price, the iron price that is required for that in roster construction. And they've pointed to all of these past Super Bowl champions of the last 12, 13 years. Randy, is there any level of correlation here? Is this kind of just a random trend in history and ultimately that doesn't equate to it? Where do you stand ultimately in all of this?
Well, your points are all valid. There is a ton of history that shows that you do not have to pay one. I think in this case, Pacheco, you could probably say, was as big a value for them as any player in the last 5 years with regard to a Super Bowl winning team. I think for the last 10 years, the running back position has been devalued in the NFL. Nobody seems to want to pay these guys unless they're a 3-down player. In other words, they can play on 3rd down from either the slot or be really good as a pass protector and be a matchup issue as a receiver. I think that's been the definitive line to pay McCaffrey, to play Joe Mixon, to pay what now is going to be Barkley. These guys are going to get that money because they're actually 3-down players. I also think you can find those guys in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, as the Chiefs did this year with Pacheco. I think his speed alone and his skill set, that to me is a flower in the cap of Besh, the general manager of the Chiefs. They have done an awesome job identifying these speed guys, whether it's at receiver or at running back, and found a way to get them on the right contract so that they can build the team around them. And this is another example of that. I don't know that I would say you can't win by paying a running back big money, Paul, but I don't think you're out seeking that. And there are very few teams that will pay that money because they're confident they can find one in the names that you just mentioned. Those guys, there's a couple of those guys that you just mentioned were college undrafted free agents.
Yes.
Pierre from New Orleans.
Correct.
Whenever that year was, he wasn't even drafted. He was a college free agent. So these guys are out there. You can find them. And there have to have a position or two on each side of the ball where you say this. We can't commit big dollars to this spot. So we're going to keep rolling it every 3 or 4 years. We're going to find another one. The Chiefs have gone a couple different ways. You know, they drafted Clyde Hilaire, the running back, in the 1st round a couple years ago. That hasn't really worked out either. So sometimes it's fate, but other times it's just really good evaluating and team building. And I'd like to say that that's more the case when it comes to these running backs. I'm not sure it was a conscious effort by any of these teams to not pay their running back. It's kind of just a coincidental way that it's worked out.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Randy, because again, as a former running back, it pained me to see that statistic that the position had been undervalued. And I was born and raised on the Emmitt Smith Dallas Cowboys and, winning 3 championships in 4 years. I was like, yeah, baby, that's how you build a team. That's what it's out. So again, I guess we're pouring one out all there for all the running backs that are out there not getting the love. But Randy fighting the good battle. That's what really that's what we love to see, baby. That's what we love to see. And guys, keep the comments coming. They're beautiful. Make sure you like the video, hit subscribe, show your support for the show. We really appreciate it, and a lot of you guys have really appreciated this show with Randy, and it's been a lot of fun. And it certainly has. So moving away from the Super Bowl, it's time to get crazy, Randy. Now that it's the off season, of course, for all these teams, the big sexy thing, especially this year, it's been this way for a couple of years, has been this crazy quarterback carousel. And it's been spinning faster than perhaps ever before. And let's get into a couple of these names. And as you prognosticated, again, Randy, you've said it on the show. You don't give predictions, you give spoiler alerts, baby. Everything you say comes to fruition. So, again, we'll get the winning lotto numbers for next week at the end of the show. But before we get there, Randy, Derek Carr was officially released this week. A lot of rumors about a potential trade or this or that, but none of that happens. He ends up getting cut straight up. Let me ask you, what's next for him? He has a unique advantage over the rest of the field. Now that he's been cut, he can sign if he wanted to today with any team. He does not have to wait to the legal tampering period, the official kickoff of the new league year in March. He can sign right now. So let me ask you, from a timeline standpoint, how quickly do you think this is going to be figured out?
Well, I don't know that it will happen until the new year kicks in because of the cap ramifications behind it. Now, would I be surprised if an agreement was reached somewhere tomorrow? No. I think the timing is the big thing. He's free now, the first of the league year, when everybody has the most money they'll have available to them in 2023 cap wise. So his timing is great. Like you said, we didn't think he would be traded. It just didn't make sense. There wasn't the motivation for him to agree to be traded. He had the no trade clause, which is really valuable in my opinion. These teams that give these no trade clauses, to me, that is giving away a big chip, and I think it gets given away way too often these days. I'll say this, in my 30-some years in the NFL, I don't think we ever gave a no trade clause to anybody, because you do give the power to the player, and he can dictate his exit strategy in that case. And Derek did that. He just said, hey, I'm not going to do this. And we gave the reasons last week. I think two things. One, there will be multiple teams that want Derek Carr. And two, he will not be taking a pay cut like we've read or heard from others as well. He's not going to have to take less money. He's going to end up with a newer deal with a higher guarantee than he had with the Raiders. All you need is two teams that are interested. And guess what? There's three teams in the NFC South all looking for quarterbacks. You don't think I'd want to be involved in that bidding war if I'm Derek Carr's agent? Come on. Yeah. It's not his first rodeo. So he'll end up somewhere for more money in a great situation, and we'll see how it goes. But it's all timing, right? Being free at the right time is how Kirk Cousins got paid. It's how Deshaun Watson got his money. You got to be free at the right time when money's available, and those are all in Derek Carr's court right now. So I think we'll see a blockbuster deal for him at some point, maybe agreed to, and then not finalized till after the first of the league year.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I don't understand. How in the heck do these no trade clauses even get included in the conversation? We're like, oh, well, Derek, here it is. And they're like, hey, by the way, I'd love a no trade clause. Why? Why? How did we even get here?
Who are we bidding against? Yeah.
Exactly. Why would you do that? If you're a team and it's you and him, why would you just, sure, let's randomly throw it in? The Raiders screwed themselves ultimately. At the end of the day, if they would have taken some of that away, obviously the Saints would have traded for him among perhaps other teams. Who knows?
The ultimate insult to that would be that if he did sign with the Saints, in the end of the day, he can say, hey, thanks for letting me get a head start. I got my physical already. I got to visit with the coaches. I already got 3 days in the Saints office to make sure this was the right spot for me. And then, they didn't have to give anything to get me. So it'd be the ultimate slap in the face of Carr back at his Raiders if he were to end up signing with New Orleans.
Oh, that's for sure. So we'll keep an eye on that, because I'm sure Raiders people would absolutely love that. Let's go to another name, and this is the most mercurial, viral name of all time. Boom, there you see it flying up on
the board. Let me guess where you're going, Paul.
Yeah. We'll see how long the green and yellow, I guess, are the colors of choice for a team behind the scenes throwing that up. But nonetheless, Aaron Rodgers, the Darkness Retreat, which apparently was supposed to start on Monday. No, it wasn't. That's fake news. It was supposed to start later in the week. When in the week? No, that's fake news too. I don't want you guys to know my life. Okay, Aaron Rodgers. And then he's surprised that it went viral. I don't know. Aaron Rodgers is a unique beast to himself, I suppose. But bluntly, in your mind, considering everything we just talked about, Randy, and the things, quite frankly, we've been talking about for weeks, is he worth it? I mean, obviously, he's got a lot of accolades, but obviously, we're just getting a small taste, just a teint, the tip of the iceberg in all of this, that Aaron Rodgers is a unique individual, to put it lightly. And obviously, to bring him in, you have to acquiesce in unique ways that you wouldn't have to normally for other quarterback names. Randy, if it was up to you and you were in the chair, is he worth all the hassle that comes with, Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, it's not an easy answer, Paul. I'll be honest with you. I think And part of that is, and I'll say this tongue in cheek, his 4 days of, what's he call it? He's going to do a
darkness retreat.
yeah,
Yes.
darkness retreat. Well, we know that's not going to be on a Tuesday. I'm going to steal this line from my partner, Mike Sando, who said he's not going to miss McAfee for this darkness retreat. So we know which days of the week that he won't be in the darkness retreat. So midweek and later, he's available anyway. Yeah, I think it does beg the question, is it worth it? Like you said, and at how much? I think the first question any team will have is, how long is Aaron going to play? We don't want to inherit every year this the turtles coming back to sea at the end of every season. We got to go through this where we pull the shades for everybody and make sure they get back to the sea. Make sure Aaron wants to play another year. Nobody wants that. Trust me. Nobody wants to be held hostage as a franchise. Nobody wants to have him to decide if he's going to play or not, or if he's going to get traded or not. So that's going to hinder part of the deal for sure. Will the Packers get a decent trade amount for him? They'll get something. But until he comes out and says, I'm going to play for 2 more years, or I'm going to play 3 more years, how do you make a deal if you're Brian Gutekunst from the Packers? You just got to take the first offer you can, or what? And then there's other angles with Aaron's answer. I'm not saying you don't trust him, but if I'm him, I might say I'm going to play another year. And therefore the amount of money or the amount of compensation my new team will give up will be low. And then I might have a chance to play longer to actually open that window of Super Bowl for that new team. I think what you're going to see at the end of the day, Paul, is he's going to be traded. But I think it's going to be a lot of conditional picks. It's going to be whatever and however long he decides to play, and the numbers that he puts up will determine the value that the Packers will get in return. So let's say if he goes somewhere and plays a year, but he signs an extension or ends up playing 2 years, the price of poker goes up as he stays and is a productive player and actually plays. So it takes some maneuvering. It'll take some negotiating, but it'll be a conditional trade based on the length of time he plays and his production. I think that's the only way to do it that's fair.
Well, I'm looking forward to all that finagling that will be happening over the coming weeks between the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers, and whoever the hell that other team is. And from one spectrum to the other, 39-year-old Aaron Rodgers all the way to rookie town. I'm going to be honest, just when you think you've been around the business a while, whether it's, radio, television, around football, when you think you've heard everything, that nothing else could possibly surprise you, all you have to do is tune into a Jim Irsay press conference and you will get some new intel. And let's go to this one. The last rung here on the quarterback carousel in the Indianapolis Colts is, guys, in case you missed it, I'll give you the highlights here. Okay, the Colts were doing a press conference to introduce Shane Steichen, their new head coach. Wonderful. Kiss the baby, sign the autographs, baby. This is great. Shane Steichen is the head coach of Indianapolis Colts. However, during the press conference, Jim Irsay, who of course is there as the acting owner, the actual
He's
owner,
the actual owner, yeah.
Yeah, he is the actual. I'm sure they wish at certain points it was the acting owner, but that's neither here nor there. He randomly says in the press conference that, we could trade up. He was talking about all the possibilities that are there for the Colts this offseason. He said we could trade up. Okay, that's hypothetical. And then he went out and said the quote, "That Alabama guy doesn't look too bad, I'll tell you." And if you just do a little connecting, some tea leaves and reading, he's talking about Bryce Young. Well, the last time I checked, the Colts have the 4th overall pick, and the Bears have the number 1 overall pick. And it sounds like he just said on a siren, "Chicago, here we come." And he also tweeted out, if that wasn't enough, that he's had a relationship with the Bears organization for 60 years. So whether he's trolling or going all in or being obvious that they really plan on trading up. And you could even hear behind him, Randy, to add this last nugget, that Ballard's behind him and said that one's going to go on Twitter. And I can only imagine what he was saying as a general manager at the press conference, kicking him under the table. Shut up, Jimmy. Shut up, Jimmy. Who don't reveal our plan. So what did you make of all this, Randy, especially as a former general manager dealing with an owner like this who couldn't help himself?
Total lunacy. That's what I felt like. The other thing that Chris Ballard said that got kind of drowned out by the voiceover of Jim Irsay was he was saying, or trade down. He had tried to put that in as well. And funny. I know Chris well. What a nightmare. What a nightmare to have to manage Jim Irsay and all of these thoughts where he's just thinking out loud and throwing stuff out there on the wall. I mean, all it's doing is creating chaos, and that Chris Ballard has to clean up. He's got to, by the way, keep the team running in a smooth and efficient way. I don't know how he does it. I don't know what has transpired, and some of the decisions they've made have been so off the wall that my guess is that Jim Irsay was involved in a lot more of them than we would admit. Obviously, we saw him hiring Jeff Saturday on his own, kind of went rogue and hired Jeff Saturday. The process of how they got back to Shane Steichen could have been, I'd like to give some truth serum to some people in that building to just take us on the journey. Give us the roadmap of when we fired Frank Reich and all the things that happened. It wouldn't be a 30 for 30. It would be a 150 for 150. I'm telling you, Paul. It'd be fun to watch, and it should be a book. Maybe a writer for the Indianapolis Star will figure it out someday and write a book on it. But it's incredible. And sometimes the job of a GM is that you have to fulfill the wishes of the owner. You have to manage the owner, but you also have to be the conscience of the owner. And that's a hard job for Chris. I know I don't know if it's daily, but it's a lot. He's got to spend a lot of time managing comments like this that are thrown out, some of it in jest, some of it tongue in cheek, some for the Twitterverse, all of that stuff. And it's a tough spot to put Chris in. The last thing he needs to do is put out a bunch of fires when him and Shane need to go to bat and figure out what's best for this franchise. So hopefully that was all just kidding aside. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what's going to happen. The last person I would want to decide who my quarterback is Jim Irsay, with all due respect. I mean, I'd love to go have a beer with him, but I'm not really interested in his thoughts on how to pick quarterbacks. Trust me. And hopefully he'll let Chris and Shane Steichen do that.
Well, first off, I'm looking forward to buying that book. Whoever has the gall to put that thing together, that would be spectacular. And secondly, if I'm the Chicago Bears general manager, Ryan Poles, if and when the Colts call, and I imagine they will, no matter what, I am going to play that Twitter video on reverse on the speakerphone when they're like, hey, what's it going to take? Boop, boop, boop. That Alabama guy doesn't look too bad. That Alabama guy doesn't look too bad. And I'll be like, whatever you were going to say, add 10 to it. Because, that I'm sure that won't come back to bite them at some point down the line.
I'm sure there was a toast in Bears' office that night. They all toasted and said, we caught one. We got one.
Fantastic.
This is it. We caught the big one right here.
That's right. I wish there was a fly on that party room. That would have been spectacular. So, of course, we will transition to how we end every show. It's emptying the GM notebook, my favorite bit on the show, where we hit a couple of random quick-hitting nuggets that we may not have already covered during the show that caught Randy's eye throughout this process. And let's start on the first one, Randy, in Houston, where D'Amico Ryans has this warm welcome home on a massive 6-year deal to return to Houston.
Yeah, I like the hire. I think it's a good fit for where they're at right now. Obviously, D'Amico Ryans is a former player, very well thought of there. It sounds to me like that the energy that this hire has created is something that can really give this franchise some momentum. But I would only caution this. It's not the coaches that I think have failed them the last couple of years. They don't have a good enough team. They don't have good enough players. They haven't found a way to get better. They're 3-13. Last time I checked, that's not all on the coach. So now we're on our third coach in 3 years. I think the pressure is really on Nick Cesario, the GM, to work together with D'Amico. Hopefully D'Amico comes in with a vision and a different set of independent eyes that can help Nick, and he can partner with Nick to get this thing figured out, because rebuilding a franchise nowadays should not take 4 or 5 years. It's just the rules are set up where you can get good in a hurry if you play your cards right. And that, for whatever reason, hasn't happened in Houston. So that was my take on the hire. I like the hire, but it's going to take more than a coach who energizes a fan base to make them good next year. They've got a little bit of money cap-wise. They're going to have to make some harder decisions. They've got to figure out what to do with Brandon Cooks, a receiver that has been disgruntled. And I said this on another show. I stole Mike Tomlin's comment from a year ago. Yes. We're interested in volunteers. We really don't want hostages. So if he doesn't want to be part of the fix going forward, he's definitely going to be part of the problem, and we probably move on. So just some interesting thoughts on that Houston hire that I'm in favor of, but I think needs a step 2 and 3 to complete the task.
And smart on D'Amico for getting that 6-year deal. Again, that
Yes.
is sometimes rare in these negotiations. He knew what the history has been and said, hey,
Yep.
I'm not going to be that guy. And if I am, you're going to pay me, and I'm going to go to Thailand until
Right.
2030. So make sure that he covered his bases. Smart on him and his representation for that. And the Baltimore Ravens, they had a very extensive search for their next offensive coordinator, and they landed in a place, quite frankly, that was a little bit surprising to me in Todd Monken being the guy who was formerly the offensive coordinator at Georgia, where he won 2 national championships, and he was the highest paid college football assistant in the entire country with a $2+ million salary. And apparently he got the offer ultimately that he couldn't refuse.
Yeah, I think a couple things come to mind with regard to this hire. Todd has a little bit of experience in the NFL. He had been a coordinator before he got to Georgia. My first reaction was, can he bring the players from Georgia too? Because that's really what we need in Baltimore.
Right.
We need a couple of those receivers. We need some more guys like that on defense. So I don't know that that's going to happen. I really didn't have a strong opinion on it being the right guy or not. Jim Harbaugh or John Harbaugh has gone out of his way to hire college guys in the past. So I don't think he's afraid to hop outside the box. I think his criteria seems to be, when he hires his coaches, a little bit different. Now, obviously, they have a quarterback in Lamar Jackson that they've got to find a way to ideally fit his skill set in with what Todd Monken's going to do. Who knows going forward if Lamar's even going to be part of that. So there's another shoe or two to drop in this whole thing. Todd Monken, his results in the NFL have been probably average. His results at Georgia, you can't argue with. But again, it's one of those where when we have better players than everybody else, we're going to win our fair share of games. I don't think that's the case with the Ravens offense. So we're going to have to see this to see if it's a good hire or not.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, there's a lot of potential sex appeal here with Todd Monken, but we will see ultimately if he can cash in on that. Again, if he brings a couple of those talented Georgia boys with him, then I'm sure the entire Ravens organization would welcome that in with a warm embrace. And speaking of, that takes us to, of course, the upcoming 2023 NFL Draft. And Randy, it sounds like you have a strong message to send out to all the people out there in this wild time of the year that it always is in the NFL offseason.
Well, I love the draft and the processes that teams take to get to the decisions that they make. The mock draft, and I'll use your term, mockery, is that for me until about 3 days before the draft, when I then welcome all these crazy mock drafts, because it helps me prepare for the draft. It helps me think of crazy things that I have not thought of before. But right now, to attach teams with players is what's tomfoolery. I mean, it's crazy. In most cases, GMs haven't studied all the players yet. And in almost every case, coaches haven't even got involved in the process. They're not even done evaluating their own players. And you get the coaches involved in the spring. There's so much more to go. Nobody knows who the best players are yet. I know there's a lot of gurus on TV and radio and everywhere else that think they do. I caution the fans to take note of the mock drafts, who your favorite analyst has going right now, and see where that is 3 months from now. And let me just also tell you, no games will have been played. No new football games will be played between now and April, but all these mock drafts are going to be upside down in another few months. Once they get the word that, hey, the NFL is not so high on this guy, or the NFL is higher on this other guy, you're going to see names come out of the pack that you've never heard of, and names that we've talked about since the first of last year that people think are the greatest thing in the world end up getting drafted in the third round. So there's a lot to this process, and we haven't even begun the long journey through the spring yet, where everybody gets their say and consensus are built. So I'm just giving a word of caution to the mock draft processes, and everybody loves to read them. Everybody wants their team to get their guy.
Sure.
We just have to pump the brakes till we get there, and get back to me in April, and we'll sort it out then.
And a big chapter in that, as in closing here, is that again, free agency comes before the draft. So all the teams that are like, oh boy, we need a quarterback. I'm just kidding, we don't, because Derek Carr, Aaron
Exactly.
Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, any of these names could go in different places. All of a sudden, needs could be drastically different following the free agency period, which, by the
Right.
way, is under a month away, which is an important note for all you mock drafters out there. Love it, Randy. That's a great mic drop for this show. That's for sure. Well, we're officially in the offseason, Randy. It's great to have you. We're going to have a lot of fun. Football, while it may be the offseason for the NFL, it's not the offseason for all the other leagues that are coming in. We have the USFL coming up, the XFL coming up in particular, wink, and we're
Yeah.
looking forward to all that fun jazz, Randy. So it's going to be an exciting process, that's for sure.
Plenty of football still to be had. I happen to be in charge of the Seattle XFL team, the Sea Dragons, and we open
Yes.
this week in Washington against the DC Defenders on ESPN on Sunday night prime time. So looking forward to that, and people are going to get a little shot of football throughout the spring. It'll be fun.
All right. Well, we all know who we'll be rooting for on this show. Go Seattle, baby. And great shameless plug there. I love it, Randy. Well, Randy, thanks as always for another great show. And we'll catch you next week and we'll recap some, I'm sure, some fun XFL stuff as well. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, Paul. Good to be with you.